Hello, and thank you all for joining us. I am so excited to be here with you this afternoon. When I was thinking of something inspirational to talk about at the beginning of our time together, I just kept thinking of you. Because here's the truth. You are my inspiration. You, organizers and activists from all across the country, you are the inspiration and my inspiration. My name is Mejia Regalado Deatrick. I'm speaking to you from Anishinaabe land in Southeast Michigan. And I'm the founder and chair of the first ever DNC Council on the Environment and Climate Crisis. The council was formed of activists, by activists, and for activists, just like you. And in our just over 2 years of existence, we have accomplished a lot. We helped to draft the DNC platform on the environmental issues. We organized environmental voters. We helped to win back the Senate. And most importantly, we helped to kick Donald Trump out of the White House and elect Joe Biden. And we are just getting started. As you know, the litany of climate headlines and catastrophes is worsening. Devastating hurricanes, uncontrollable fires in the West already this year, again, historic raining and flooding in the plains and Midwest, wild swings in extreme weather, and it harms people, it harms communities. Nationally, over 40% of Americans live in counties that were hit by climate disaster in 2021. More than 80% lived through a heat wave last year, and at least 650 died in the climate crisis. The cost in human cost was immeasurable. The economic cost was over 104 billion, and this one still stuns me. Every week, nearly 17 billion is spent on healthcare needed due to fossil fuel pollution. So the climate crisis is not coming, it is here. You know that, I know that, but sadly, too many in Washington, D.C. deny, delay, and disrupt about this issue. And we're at a tipping point. The need to act is now. The incredible surge and strength of youth activism in response to that necessity has been so important. And there are many times when I feel that in too many ways, my generation and those that came before us have failed your generation and the generations after you. But I also know this. Together, millions of youth and elders and people in between are now working to save people and planet. And when we organize, we win. The forces gathered against us are powerful and entrenched. The fossil fuel industry has known about the effects of their products on driving global heating for decades and has intentionally misled and lied to the world about it. This is the same fossil fuel industry receiving $20 billion every year, more than that, in government subsidies to prop up their projects and their projects that destroy people and planet. The same fossil fuel companies that are receiving over $6 trillion in subsidies globally. The same fossil fuel companies whose executives got nearly $400 million in compensation last year alone. And it's people like all of you here this afternoon who've been critical to putting these issues front and center. So thank you. Thank you for that, for your work and your activism and your ideas and your leadership in this all hands on deck moment, decade, century. Pushing back on disinformation and promoting environmental literacy digitally is really important and a key place for youth involvement. We're consuming information in ways that we couldn't imagine even a decade ago. Facebook, yes, but Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, group chats, DMs, Slacks, Twitter is its whole new issue, as we know, but there are no gatekeepers. And while that lets disinformation spread in dangerous ways, it also means your voice matters now more than ever. You have the power to influence your peers and the digital narrative, and that voice is more important than that of any gatekeeper or influencer. So, the 2022 and 2024 elections are coming up. Some of you I know are already working on them. We know we need more leaders who stand up for the climate, and we are working to support them whenever and wherever we can. This fight is too big to tackle alone. Our opponents are too big, too corrupt, too self-interested. So they're not going to go quietly into that good night. But we won't back down, and we won't be quiet. So let's use this hour to build our movement. Connect with each other and chat on Facebook or on YouTube. Engage with our fantastic chat team. Andre Triber is here, chair of the National DNC Youth Council, just elected last month, and Preston Van Alstyne, a volunteer for the council who's done so much to help build us out. Sign up for council updates and get involved in our work. Text climate to 833-661 1550 or find us on Twitter at DNC Climate. And if you're interested in the DNC Youth Council, sign up for us, for the Environmental Council. We'll get you information out about how to connect with the Youth Council. We have an amazing panel lined up for you. We are greatly honored to be joined by Alex Goldenwolf, founder of Indigenous Earth Protectors and a Line 3 activist, by John Paul Mejia, Sunrise National spokesperson, by Patty O'Keefe, organizer involved with Sierra Club's Beyond Coal campaign, and later on, Isaac V., a youth plaintiff in the crucial Juliana versus U.S. court case, will join us, rounding out this afternoon on this last day of Earth Month. All of them bring so much experience and expertise to this fight. And now it's my pleasure to pass the mic to kick off our afternoon to Paul Pressendu, who is the youth director of our council, vice chair of the Young Dems of America's Environmental Caucus, who lives in New Rochelle, New York, and serves as Sustainability Advisory Committee chair for his municipal government, and the proud son of Colombian and Haitian immigrants. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for having me, and thank you constantly for your mentorship as well, too. It is an honor to be here today with all of you. I'm so pleased that this is one of my first official events as a youth director of this vital council. As Michelle laid out, while still less than 3 years old, this council has accomplished so much. And to Michelle's credit, young activists have always been a focus of our work. Not too many councils even have a youth director, but we do, because we know that you are all not only a moral force within the Democratic Party, but also an electoral force and an organizing force. And to be honest, if we're going to be able to tackle the climate crisis with the urgency and boldness that is required, I'm confident that it will be our generation that pushes our leaders into action. We know the clock is running out to act. We also know that it is our generation and the generations that follow that will pay the steepest price for inaction. We cannot allow corporations to profit from making our future toxic, and we cannot allow climate deniers to determine our future. We cannot allow politicians to refuse to act with the boldness and urgency that is needed to determine the fate of the world we will raise our families in. Look, we know this country is still facing an unprecedented health and economic crisis, despite the desire by some to deny this reality. And corporate handouts to the fossil fuel industry are helping to drive the unprecedented expansion of fossil fuel development in the United States of America. Left unchecked, the United States is on track to be responsible for 60% of the global growth in oil and gas production over the next 10 years. And it is our generation that will pay that price, which is why we're organizing our generation to ensure our voice is heard in this debate. And we need to organize both inside and outside of the Democratic Party. We know that we will be a force inside the Democratic Party, as we've seen in so many states where young Democrats are working hard in their college and Young Democrats of America groups to uphold the need for bold climate action. And we can and need to be a bigger force within our party. Climate consistently polls as the #1 issue for young Democratic voters. We need to harness that power, our power to push our party to turn out voters, to organize and ensure our elected leaders are listening to us and taking bold action needed. Because here's the truth. Youth activity in our party on climate is essential as new generations of voters come to age, to build a bench of party organizers, volunteers, and party and campaign staff and candidates who are versed on this specific issue. We need the power of those empowered to know it. And I know this moment can feel very disempowering. The policy and political outlook is challenging. The attacks on the issues we care about are relentless and effective. But to me, that is the very reason we need to double down. Giving up is not an option. Too much is at stake. This is our moment and we need to seize it. I truly am so grateful you are all here tonight. I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you all for joining us this evening. And also thank you, Michelle Deatrick, because without you as our chair, we would not have the safe space to be able to have this conversation. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Paul, for this and everything. Next speaker is John Paul Mejia, an organizer and developing scholar. His commitment to climate activism started in high school when Hurricane Irma threatened his hometown, Miami, And in the aftermath, he saw how his community was treated as disposable and was propelled into action. Today, John Paul is the national spokesperson for the Sunrise Movement, which, as you know, is a youth movement working to stop the climate crisis and create a just society in the process. As a Frederick Douglass Distinguished Scholar at American University, he centers social responsibility and justice in his scholarly work as he does in his activism. Welcome, John Paul.
Thank you so much, Michelle, and thank you so much to the rest of the wonderful panelists that I see before me on my screen. We are certainly in crazy times where we are still doing this online, but the proximity and the smiles and the words of hope that I feel nonetheless are striking. I want to talk a little bit about why I'm here and what sort of started this journey as to why I'm here. So, like Michelle mentioned, I got involved in the climate fight when I was 16 years old in my sophomore year of high school. And that happened because I felt something had changed in the place that I call home. I grew up in Miami, Florida. It's a place that I absolutely love. It's a place that for me embodies in its best light everything the United States has the possibility of being. And in this year, in 2018, I believe it was, there was a hurricane that intensified from a Category 1 to a Category 4 merely overnight. It was something that we hadn't really seen before. And it turns out it really was climate induced. Now, my mom and I, not knowing what to do, raided our pantries, raided our closets, and went off to the home of a more affluent friend with resources and protection as our building had shut the utilities off 4 days prior to the hurricane even making landfall. Now, thankfully, the storm changed its trajectory and its mere tailwinds hit Miami. But once I started going back to my communities or communities that looked like mine, I noticed something interesting, not only about this hurricane, but the climate crisis itself. See, the hurricane's path of destruction was carved along the lines of inequalities of race and class. And in that moment, I understood something. I understood that the climate crisis, something that I had been quite passionate about even in middle school, wasn't merely a scientific problem, but a social one that could be solved by actually harnessing enough political power. And that's when I began organizing. And you know, in order to start organizing, the first thing I had to do was get over the doom and gloom and anger that I honestly felt that day as I looked out and saw my community destroyed. And what was able to take me over that edge was actually another thing that I saw in the aspect of that, in the aftermath of that storm. I saw people from all walks of life rebuilding each other's home, thatching roofs, taking care of each other's kids, supplying for each other generators. I saw an engaged people ready to rebuild. And that's exactly what we have before us today with the Democratic Party. See, we have understood, our generation and loads of people who we love understand the crises before us. And we know that the solutions are in place as well. And we know that we have a community out there of people from every town and every city across the United States that are ready to lead a transition towards a better economy and a better democracy. But frankly, the mission before us is not to give up, but to rather engage in that fight. And when we talk about being able to bring that fight, that vision to the Democratic Party, we're talking about building political power at the level of people power and political power. We need to build a party that actually believes that communities shouldn't have to fend for themselves in times of crisis, but are instead provided resources and support to thrive. We need to build a party that believes that our jobs shouldn't hold us hostage solely for survival, but jobs that allow us to prosper and achieve meaning. We need to build a party that believes that every worker should not only have a voice through their union, but earns their full worth. A party that actually believes that healthcare is a right accessible to all instead of the business of a few. A party that believes that we shouldn't continue legacies of injustice against others, but redress and heal them. A party that believes that young people shouldn't be trapped in fear and debt, but are guaranteed education, a safe climate, and the ability to dream. Those are only a few aspects of the vision before us. And I know that together here on this call, we can build a world, we can build a party, we can build political power where the places that we call home are here to stay and the natural beauty of our earth is around for generations to come. So I'm very excited to get into that today.
John Paul, thank you. And I'm so glad we're going to get to talk more later during the panel conversation. A very warm welcome to Alex Goldenwolf, who is the founder of Indigenous Earth Protector, a grassroots organization. I've been hearing amazing things about the work that and activism that Alex has been doing. Their goal is to protect the earth by cleaning up the earth. And before this, they were on the front lines during line 3. So grateful you can join us, Alex. Your mic. Nope, your mic.
Is it good?
Now you're good.
Okay, sorry about that. My name is Alex Goldenwolf, and I'm very grateful to be here today. I'm from the White Earth Reservation in Minnesota. I'm Ojibwe, in other words, Anishinaabe. I'm here today because climate affected my area of where I live at in Minnesota. Last year, Enbridge stole 30 million gallons of water from our water resources in Minnesota, and then also put in a line 3 pipeline, which is a tar sands pipeline, and it comes from Alberta, Canada, from another reservation up there, and it's one of the worst tar oil pipelines out there because it runs tar sands through the pipes, and they go ship it into Superior, Wisconsin. And now they're working on line 5 actually, and it goes from northern Wisconsin into Michigan, into the Michigan Strait, and they want to pass under the Great Lakes, and that's very dangerous because there's a little rift over there, and if that rift happens, that pipeline can break and it will leak into the Great Lakes. And that to me is very, very scary because that's where millions and millions of people get their water from. And it's very detrimental because there's a million people that live south of Minnesota that get their drinking water from the Mississippi River. And line 3 crossed the Mississippi River 3 times. And that has a higher chance of being busted now because right now Minnesota is actually flooding from all the snow and stuff, and all that water is going to go into the mud, and it's going to make the soil really soft, and then that pipeline has a higher chance of breaking because it doesn't have that solidness of the soil around it. And that to me is very scary. And when oil breaks into the soil, it destroys everything around it. All the animals, all the humans, all the plants, everything is at risk right now with this pipeline. And all they want with this pipeline is money. It's all about money. It's all about greed. It's all about sustaining this American lifestyle that we've been fed from the American government. And I don't want to sit back anymore and sitting this lie that like we're gonna be fine. I am not gonna be fine in 10 years, in 5 years, because the BIPOC community, we suffer the most with environmental cause. They put pipelines and reservations because it's cheaper for them, because they can't get taxed. It's a way for them to make more money off of my Indigenous sovereignty. And it really breaks my heart that I have to be here to say something. I shouldn't have to be here. And I'm really emotional right now because of it. My food is under attack. My water is under attack. My community, and it doesn't just extend to my community. It extends to everybody's community around here. I'm in DC right now, and I'm just in this concrete jungle that people call home. And I can see why they call it home because I have family here. And I don't want to wreck their family house, their lifestyle, but my life is also on the line, my community, you know. And I feel like that's all I have to say right now. Thank you.
Alex, thank you so much. for sharing that and for everything you do and for fighting on the pipelines. I fight Line 5 here in Michigan, and you explained so well, a complicated situation and the many ways in which these pipelines are way beyond problematic. And I'm glad that you'll be joining us for the panel discussion also a little later. Thank you. It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure to welcome Patty O'Keefe, who's an organizer with the Beyond Coal campaign at the Sierra Club. Patty's work is focused on creating public demand for climate action and 100% clean energy in Minnesota. She has been active in national and statewide climate movements since 2012, building power with communities to achieve legislative, regulatory, and corporate wins on climate. So her passions lie in the intersection of climate change, youth movements, and social justice. And in her free time, she enjoys cooking, watching sci-fi movies, and snuggling with her cats, Bandit and Butter. I share the first two of those, not the cats. Patty, welcome.
Oh, thank you. I forgot I put that in my bio. Yes, thank you so much for having me today, and really happy to be with you all. My name is Patty O'Keefe. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an organizer in Minnesota. I live in Minneapolis, which is occupied Dakota and Ojibwe lands. I grew up here, and I've identified as a Democrat since I was a teenager because my family was low income and we relied on Social Security and medical assistance growing up. And, I remember being told that there was, one of two major political parties that supported social programs like the ones that we were on, and that party was the Democratic Party. I went to the U of M, the University of Minnesota, where I majored in youth studies and started organizing on a number of student-led campaigns on campus. And after that, I got a job supporting students working on fossil fuel divestment campaigns on their college campuses across the state. And that's where I really started to learn a lot about the power and the reach of the fossil fuel industry, how our institutions play a key role in propping them up. And at the same time, I started getting involved with the Indigenous-led resistance to oil pipelines in Minnesota, and started learning about the connections between climate change and colonization and white supremacy, and started to examine my own whiteness and privilege and place in the movement. My organizing started on a local level, not my university in the city I lived in. But then I, started learning about what progress we were and weren't making as a state. And I wanted to meet people outside of Minneapolis who were working on climate and environmental issues. So I joined the DFL Environmental Caucus, which was kind of like my first, kind of official, involvement with the party beyond just voting. And I met lots of people there who were from across the state working together to push the party to take on stronger stances across a number of different issues. I was definitely one of the younger people in the room, but also able to make a lot of important connections and use that as a vehicle to influence state policy. When I think about kind of the fight that we're up against, it's, it's not often that whole sectors of our economy shift. And if we don't intervene, it, one, is not going to happen fast enough, but two, it will shift with the same systems of power remaining in place, power structures that we know are the root causes for climate change in the first place. Our current economy treats people, certain places on the planet as a whole, as disposable. And we need to use this opportunity to push for a new economy that redistributes wealth and power. I have this poem that I've heard a number of times in the racial justice movements in Minneapolis, and I wanted to share it. It's by Lynn Unger, and it's called Breathe. And it goes, "How can I breathe at a time like this, when the air is full of smoke, of burning tires, of burning lives? Just breathe," the wind insisted. "Easy for you to say if the weight of injustice is not wrapped all around you, cutting off all air. I need you to breathe. I need you to breathe. Don't tell me to be calm when there are so many reasons to be angry, so much cause for despair. I didn't say to be calm, said the wind. I said to breathe. We're going to need a lot of air to make this hurricane together.
Thank you, Patty. That was beautiful. I'm a poet too, and appreciate that. We're going to move into our panel discussion now. And I'm so glad that we're going to have some time to talk together. And we solicited questions from listeners. And so I'm going to open with one of those questions. Lucero from Columbia, South Carolina asks, this is not a softball question, by the way, asks, what is really keeping us from moving away from fossil fuel? I'm just going to invite you to go ahead and jump in. John Paul, you look like you want to kick that answer off. Don't forget to unmute yourself. So, yeah.
Sure, I can definitely start off, and then welcome folks to join in. But one of, just the absolutely crucial pieces of why we're not moving off of fossil fuels fast enough is because of the outsized money that the fossil fuel industry has, and that they are able to plug in to loads of elections across this country, for one. Even within, the Democratic Party itself, you have candidates flooded with fossil fuel money who are willing to return favors and legislate for the industry once they get into office. And, that is definitely one of the reasons why we can't move off of fossil fuels fast enough, but also because the fossil fuel industry, using its political leverage, also is able to continually make us dependent on fossil fuels and obstruct any other form of progress or any solutions which have been on the table for years from getting the right funding or exploration or even implementation, because we know we can equitably transition off of them.
Thank you. And looks like Alex may have lost their connection, but Patty, did you want to jump in and other thoughts on what's really keeping us from moving away from fossil fuels at the national, federal, local level?
Yeah, definitely. Plus one to everything John Paul said. And I think the reason that we have over 70% of the country concerned about climate change, and have it be a top issue for one of our main political parties and still not have good climate policy, is because the fossil fuel industry is is well financed and well organized, and then in turn they are subsidized through the government and through politicians that receive their campaign donations. And then what you alluded to earlier, Michelle, that companies like ExxonMobil and other fossil fuel companies have cultivated decades-long disinformation campaigns that have allowed them the political power to continue business as usual. And I think that we see that at almost every level of government. I know that we in Minnesota have a lot of politicians that take donations from fossil fuel companies, from like big investor-owned utilities, and it's a huge problem. And I think that that's something that that I did not know before I started getting involved in this work. I didn't know about kind of how influential the fossil fuel industry and fossil fuel, CEOs are in our politics.
Yeah, and I think the point about it, we hear a lot about what's happening at the federal level, but with the decline of the press at the local and state level, we don't always hear about the influence on politicians and our systems at those levels. Alex, did you want to jump in? We were talking about what's really keeping us from moving away from fossil fuels into the wind and solar that we have, and it's not expensive, you know.
Yeah. So my take on it is, again, also money. It's all money. It's all money derived. That's where a lot of these politicians get bribed at, is like they get these they get bribed with millions of dollars. And I've actually seen Enbridge pay off cops and stuff. They pay for them, like, their military equipment. They militarize a couple of the local county police over in Line 3. And that's illegal to do because they're actually hiring a private company via the cops, and you can't do that legally in the States. But they did that by paying them off and bribing them with money, and that has to go into like them defending Enbridge Line 3, and it has to do with the government, because the government, they know what the Enbridge is doing because they pay off the government, the county as well. And it all has to do with this whole money scheme, and it's very, very toxic, and it's very manipulative, because then us climate activists, we know we don't have the funds or means to like bribe a politician, but these guys do, and they just take that money because it's all greed for them. They just, you know, it's their way of life.
Yeah, and that experience of being there on the pipeline, seeing these things happen, and feeling the harms and impacts of the results are really compelling. As a former county commissioner, I can also say that local governments are so strapped of money because of what a certain political party has done, that property taxes from pipelines can be an important part of their delivering public health services. So, you know, when I was fighting pipelines in my own county, that argument was used against me. I mean, I still fought the pipeline, but the system is really broken, or you could say it's functioning just to help all those people who are benefiting from it. So thank you. And on to a next question. And just a little background. As Patty mentioned, we know that over 70% of Americans not only understand the reality of global warming, but are also worried, concerned about it, right? And want something to be done. And we know those numbers are much higher among younger Americans. There's actually been a surge of news coverage in the last 10 days about how the issue of climate change might impact not just the midterms, but also the Democratic Party going forward. We know it was important in helping with voter turnout, for example, in the last election. So two sort of related questions for an open-ended conversation. You know, why is it important for the Democratic Party to be the climate party? And how can Democrats be the climate party? So sort of the how and the why. Alex, would you like to start us off with that one?
I would like someone else to start off. Thank you.
I'm happy to start with that one. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think that the kind of the why is it important. I think about it in two ways, I guess. It's for one, and one is a little bit more, I don't know, scary sounding than the other, but you know, as the climate continues to worsen, as we continue to see worse and worse effects on our ecosystems and on our communities, we're going to see more political instability, social instability, and, you know, when people feel afraid, that is something that a lot of times is an emotion that people will use and manipulate to build more power. And the right, I think, it's very likely that the right is going to try and take advantage of the fear and the instability that's going to come with increased climate chaos, and use it to their advantage to try and consolidate power. That is why it's really important for the Democratic Party to be the party that is taking climate change seriously, and not just climate change, but is really leading on the transformation of our entire economy that needs to take place in order to actually solve the problem at the scale that it needs, and solve the root issues of climate change that include extreme wealth inequality and white supremacy and racial injustice. So I mean, this is an opportunity that the Democratic Party can make to shift and put our actions in line with our values, and to transform us into a party that is truly for working people. And I think that the way that they can do that, the way that you do that, is by supporting multiracial movements for deep political and social change, and supporting climate movements and climate policies that are being led and formulated by people most impacted by climate change. So by BIPOC communities, by low-income people, because folks who are most impacted are the ones that intimately know what the issues with our systems are, and are the ones that will be necessary with coming up with the answers of how to fix it. And instead of building new systems that can continue to have problematic power dynamics and perpetuate oppression.
Thank you. John Paul, Alex, anything you'd like to add?
Sure. I'll just say that one of the reasons that Patty mentioned and Alex definitely alluded to is that a lot of what lies at the stem of the climate crisis is a complete erasure of voices, a complete erasure of entire groups of people and land that has, effectively led the way for people in power to discount entire, groups of people who live in the land that we call the United States now, and carry forward a vision of this country under which we're living today, that is throttling us towards disaster. And so I think I want to use that as a premise for the why the Democratic Party has to be, I think, the climate party. One thing that we've learned over the past 2 years is that, the GOP has, I think, radicalized to an extent where it is not a party that is committed to democracy anymore. We have seen that they have used their minority rule in the Senate, which, by the way, is a body that owes its origins to compromises with enslavers, to effectively stymie the popular will of the people of this country to champion forward a multiracial democracy. We see that as Build Back Better, which is an incredibly popular agenda, is being stymied. We see that with the complete, very anti-democratic attack on voting rights earlier this year. We see it in every corner. And so with that party somewhat discounted for its lack of adherence to any form of democracy that would be able to bring forth popular solutions and popular wills like solving the climate crisis, we can turn our attention to a party that, there's at least some hope in, right? And so the Democratic Party, one of the things that we can look to it for is, how it faced an emergency and how it faced a political savviness in a time of crisis before, right? When we look back at World War II, we understood that in order to fight the threat that was a world war and fascism, the Democrats who ran on a bold mandate to tackle these emergencies and built a coalition across race and class and so on, even though it wasn't perfect, we could go into that. We're able to mobilize every sector of our economy, like Patty was saying, to actually achieve that threat and defeat it, right? Right now, we are positioned with another one of those threats, perhaps even greater. It is existential at this point. And so when we look at the Democratic Party for a solution, we look at it as that entity that's able to build a political coalition that encompasses the multiracial democracy that we need in order to solve the climate crisis. And we have evidence of that, right? In 2020, we saw people like myself, right? Young people, an entire generation, absolutely shatter turnout expectations and break the record on turnout expectations because we felt like we had a party and a presidential candidate who was speaking to us. And that was only the result of loads of social movement building, and like our movement, along with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, actually being at the helm of policy making and creating the climate plan that Joe Biden ran on, which, by the way, was polling more popular than him at one point. So the answers and the solutions are already there. What we have to actually do is make sure that this mandate keeps getting heard. We recently conducted a poll with Data for Progress showing that the Green New Deal and climate as a whole remains a driving force for young voters as we approach the midterms. And President Biden's approval ratings and the party's approval ratings went from like a really pretty high place in January when we were getting all of these climate executive orders to a pretty low point somewhat recently. And the thing that we see is what coincides with those declining numbers is actually, the president's climate plan getting gobbled up. So this is the message that we need to uphold to the Democratic Party, that not only is running on climate the morally right thing to do, but it's also the strategic and winning thing to do. And together, we, across race, across class, across age, and so on, can actually build a party that works for us and save our communities in the process.
Thank you, John Paul. Anyone want to add anything else?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I feel like the Democratic Party is like trying to do their job, and I feel that, but I feel like we need more to really push the agenda on the climate crisis and like not put a dirty face on it, because I was just watching this like news clip, and they were talking around about climate change on this news channel, and it was really triggering because they were trying to put like oh, we still have time, but we need to wake up and realize that we really don't have enough time. And I feel like if you really like push the Democratic Party to really advocate for like us BIPOC or low-income communities, that we can probably make a change within the near future, but I don't know how near that future is because of how detrimental the climate crisis is at. They say we have like less than 5 years, and it's just as bad as here, as in India, as in China, in South America. It's all over. So it doesn't just have to be with America, it has to be with everybody that works as a whole unit.
Your point about the urgency and whether our systems, including the party, can move quickly enough is obviously well taken. My kids are your ages, and so when I hear you all, I hear them too. So I think we have time for one more question, maybe two, depending. We got a number of people asking sort of variations on this, and it was around how, Alice from Portland and Karen from Walnut Creek, California, how can elders and aspiring elders help, and how can we unite climate concerned older adults with younger activists? Anyone want to jump in? And
yeah, I think I think it's really important to have our older generation communicate with us as a younger generation, like, because like our older generation, they're kind of not like stuck in the time of like use and use and use, because that was fed to them by the news and media, and then that pushed us to use and use. And when I say use, I mean like buy material items and you just like use it once and you can get rid of it. I think it's really important to include them into the conversation and change the narrative about recycling and reusing stuff, and just not consuming it, and involving them in with the conversation with our younger generation. I feel like we can have a clear understanding about where we want to go in the near future, because we want to help out our elders within our community, but we also want to help out our next generations, you know, the ones that aren't even born yet. And so like if we put that perspective that like it's not just about them, but it's about like the future generations, and we need to make that bridge, and we need to include them by like bringing them to our spaces and our communities and be like, hey, we're having like a action this day, or like a visual, or we're just, you know, or you know, you just include them, and I think it'll make a change, and it'll open their eyes a little more and show them that we're not like these crazy people that yell around, but yet we're just singing for Mother Earth and singing what she wants everybody else to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Any other?
I'll just say that I love that that question is being asked in the first place, because I think there's often moments where, you know, well-intentioned folks in older generations sort of, you know, look at me and say, oh, I'm so glad your generation's doing something about it. And then sort of kick back and I'm like, wow, that's kind of like a big responsibility to give me, especially considering that you're alive and well. But I think,
You're here.
you know, yeah, one of the things that Alex was saying is crucial, which is that, you know, this is a mobilization that requires us to think collectively about what it means to actually build a world that works for all of us. And similarly, I think I would stretch that line of thinking to form part of our movements as well. And so there's a lot of things that you'll, you know, there, I think what often as an organizer, sometimes I've had the trouble of doing is like being able to articulate to like older folks how to plug into youth movements, because I think, you know, it's important that like we are able to give young people a voice and are able to like wage the moral authority that young people have over a future that seems uncertain. But I think there's also ways that, you know, older folks can really be crucial to that too. And there's a way that, you know, you can help and really be part of a movement without being necessarily at the forefront, and play really crucial roles while doing so. One of the things that, you know, this doesn't only pertain to you if you are an elder, but if perhaps you have some form of class privilege or, you know, like disposable income or whatever, being able to like actually donate to movements, donate to bail funds, donate to some of the work that's being done is crucial, right? That, you know, like that is a direct form of material solidarity that can be provided. Time, you know, a lot of us are full-time college students or like full-time students or have jobs and stuff like that. Being able to, you know, make calls, phone banks, text banks, like be able to reach out to people, that's crucial too. Social capital is also really important, right? The people you know, the places you have access to. Folks who are older often get taken more seriously than we do. So being an ally in the fight in those three ways often encapsulate just a range of ways that you could be really helpful to a youth movement from my perspective.
Thank you, Alex and John Paul. And Patty, did you have like 2 sentences to add?
Yeah, I just I really appreciated that. Money, time, social capital, and just you know, honoring, I think honoring our you know, honoring young people, honoring kind of our boldness, honoring how kind of fresh our grief is. and that we're going to be experiencing some of the worst effects of climate change, and and helping us to not feel like we are political outsiders, and by actively working with us to change the culture within our political system and within the party, to make it more inclusive of young people, of people of color, and people of marginalized identities.
Thank you. This was an incredible conversation, and I learned so much. And I would say that to those of us in the not young category is listen and learn and support. And so I am now delighted that Isaac V, who is one of the youth plaintiffs in the important federal court case, Juliana versus United States, is able to join us to round out today's session. For Isaac's fifth grade science project, he researched carbon footprint statistics and climate change education. And since then, his passion for the topic has only grown. He was especially inspired by meeting Bill McKibben, co-founder of 350.org, and also Third Act, which, by the way, is an organization for elders who are care deeply and want to do activism around climate. After meeting Bill McKibben, Isaac began a campaign to get the city of Beaverton to divest from fossil fuels and dedicated his Bar Mitzvah project to this effort. He's also a member of Plant for the Planet and helped organize the first ever Plant for the Planet Academy in the US outside of Washington State. He's been named a Climate Justice Ambassador. Isaac, thank you so much for being here with us today. And it's a very special day, and I hope you'll talk about that.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And it was great to hear everybody on the panel today. Patty, John, Alex. It was great to hear from you guys. You guys have a lot of insight, and I learned a lot from you guys. So as you said, my name is Isaac. I am 20 years old, and I'm currently based here in Washington, D.C. I go to Howard University, and I've been passionately working on the climate crisis since I was very, very young. Since I was 13 is probably when I can first recall my first big step, which was naming myself as a plaintiff in the federal lawsuit, Juliana versus United States. I signed up for this lawsuit and decided to become a plaintiff because, like myself and 25 million Americans across the country, suffer from asthma. And I love going outside and enjoying outdoor activities. I grew up gardening. I grew up hiking, biking, and just being out in my community and enjoying nature and all of its wonder and splendor. And one of the main consequences the climate crisis has impacted on my community is wildfires. And as the increasing wildfire seasons, or as the wildfire seasons have elongated from roughly 25 days to somewhere around 120 days in Oregon, the state just burns all summer. And that has impacted my health. I can't breathe in that smoke. I had to relocate one time in late 2020 to back out here to DC because I needed to get out of the state because the smoke was just that bad. So back to the reason why I joined, or the point of the lawsuit. So the lawsuit was put together by Our Children's Trust, a nonprofit public interest law firm that provides free legal representation and support to youth from diverse backgrounds to secure youth's legal rights to the safe climate in state, federal, and global lawsuits. So myself and 20 other youth plaintiffs, ranging now from ages 14 to 26, have been asserting that our federal government, through its affirmative actions like fossil fuel energy policies that cause and worsen the climate crisis, have violated our constitutional rights to life, liberty, and property, and equal protection under the law, and as well as failed protected essential public trust resources. So currently, we are seeking a judicial declaration from the United States Fossil Fuel and Energy, a judicial declaration saying that the United States fossil fuel energy system is unconstitutional and violates our fundamental rights to a stable climate. And even though I'm now old enough to vote, many children, including a few of my co-plaintiffs, are not, which bars them from securing their constitutional rights to a safe climate through voting. So that's why we brought forward this lawsuit. We need to have a voice in the court system when our rights are at stake, and the court needs to do their duty to protect children's fundamental rights. It's the job of the courts to protect our constitutional rights. While we still are waiting for our day in court, it's a long story, we continue to suffer from the increasingly severe climate harms, but we need to be heard and we need to go to trial. And so if you want to learn more about the lawsuit, we just got put on Netflix for our documentary about it, Youth v. Gov. It just came out yesterday. So if you just look up Youth v. Gov, it gives a very good in-depth background on how we started the lawsuit, where we were at the time, and where we're headed now. So anyways, it was great hearing from everybody, and thank you for having me.
Isaac, thank you so much. Thank you to all you and all the other plaintiffs. And I watched the documentary last night. It is definitely worth a watch, inspiring, frustrating, makes me more determined than ever to keep going and to support the work that you and other youth are doing. I wanted to thank all of our panelists and speakers and to thank Paul one last time. They were fantastic. And a big thank you to our chat moderators as well. But most importantly, I want to thank all of you for joining us here today. And I want to conclude with this important message. You know, we're at such a critical time, and everything we hold dear is going to be on the ballot in just a few short months. The environment, the climate crisis, voting rights, women's rights, LGBTQ plus rights, the very foundation of our democracy, free and fair elections. And I know it's an overused line, but it's never been more true that this is the most important election of our lifetime. And the reason each electoral cycle people say that, and it's true every single time, is that the scope and scale and intensity of these ongoing crises, the inequality crisis, the climate and environmental justice crises, racial injustice crisis, challenges to democracy, they are all increasing, and the systems that uphold them are becoming more and more entrenched. So imagine Speaker Kevin McCarthy, imagine Chair of the Judiciary Committee, Jim Jordan, leading impeachment hearings against Joe Biden, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell blocking everything in the Senate, Chairman Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley, Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, not as backbenchers, but in leadership positions. And that's the reality if we don't win in November. And that reality could be repeated further down into our state and our local governments. And they're not just going to stop the Biden agenda in its tracks. They're going to reverse decades of progress. Look at what DeSantis is doing in Florida, Abbott in Texas. And now imagine that at the federal level. And that's what Republican control of Congress will mean. So for the environment and climate crisis, it's going to mean climate deniers are in charge. It will mean multiple committee chairmen and chairwomen who are on the bankroll of the oil companies. It will mean the very worst of the anti-science crew deciding our national policies and doing what they do best, deny, delay, and disrupt any progress we're making. And no, we're not making enough progress even now, but we will go backwards. And it all paves the way for a future for return of Trump. So I know people on this live stream and so many of you watching, you know as well as I do that we cannot and will not allow this for the sake of our country and democracy, and that we got to work day and night to stop this, as youth did in the last election cycle, for which I am personally so grateful. And that's what we're doing at the council. We're going to run the most aggressive political program in our history. We're going to go out and educate and turn out voters, train candidates, and organizing communities, push back on the false narratives and disinformation. And we need all of you to be with us on that, and we'll be with you. So, so please engage with Sunrise and Sierra Club and Founders for Democracy. And we've got to protect our congressional majorities. Please join the council. We know the environmental vote can make the difference in this election as it did in 2020. The armchair pundits are saying this election is already decided and we have lost, and that history is not on our side. But change is possible. change is always possible. And we who care deeply about the future of this planet and its people hold on to that knowledge and that hope for this election and our future. Faced with apartheid, Nelson Mandela and other leaders of the African National Congress changed history. Facing the Depression, FDR rolled up his sleeves and changed history in a mostly good way. Rosa Parks and Rachel Carson, Erin Brockovich, Peggy Shepard, right now of We Act for Environmental Justice, Indigenous Water Protectors, the Sunrise Youth, and so many other amazing youth organizations, because history does not have to repeat itself. And it all starts with organizing, building coalitions and our movement, and supporting one another. So let's prove the pundits wrong. Let's win in November, and let's make sure that we get the climate and environmental justice policies that we need. So thanks for being here this afternoon and being engaged in this fight. Please join us. Text climate to 833-661-1150. We can win, we must win, and we're going to win. Thank you and good afternoon.